Level 1 Futility. Where ambition goes to die. Sunderland. This club is the absolute definition of wasted potential, a former English title winner whose modern era is a slow, agonizing death. They have a massive, imposing stadium, the Stadium of Light, a 49,000-seat bowl built on the back of great ambition, and a fiercely loyal and large fanbase, yet their modern history is an agonizing cycle of boom and bust followed by a prolonged, painful death in the lower leagues. They made the incredible mistake of being too good for the Championship but utterly unprepared for the Premier League. They spent 2 decades cycling between high-profile signings who failed, like the disastrous acquisitions under Ellis Short, and desperate, soul-crushing survival bids under managers like Sam Allardyce and Gus Poyet. They became the poster child for institutional chaos, suffering the almost unthinkable humiliation of back-to-back relegations from the Premier League to League One. This wasn't just a sporting failure, it was a total institutional collapse. The most damning stat? They once recorded the lowest points tally in Premier League history, 19 points in 2005 to 2006, a record at the time, a brutal testament to a club that repeatedly failed to manage its own destiny. They have now spent years outside the top flight, an exile that has exposed the deep-seated rot beneath the surface. They were cursed by bad managerial appointments, massive debt, and a fatal inability to translate the passion of the terraces into professionalism in the boardroom. The Netflix documentary about their collapse simply confirmed what everyone already knew: a powerful fanbase constantly being sold false hope by incompetent leadership. The money ran out, the quality eroded, and the pride evaporated, leaving behind a husk of a legendary club. Bolton Wanderers. Their peak was a stunning, short-lived anomaly. Under Sam Allardyce in the mid-2000s, they became the ultimate tactical oddity, a team of global veterans and ex-superstars like J.J. Okocha, Ivan Campo, and Yuri Djorkaeff, playing rugged, yet surprisingly technical, football that somehow dragged them into Europe. That was their ceiling, a brilliant, high-risk assembly of talent. Their subsequent collapse was brutal and swift, proving that they were not built for long-term sustainability. They were built on high-risk, high-wage contracts for aging stars. The moment the funds dried up and the manager left for Newcastle, the entire structure dissolved. They became a catastrophic cautionary tale of a club that chased the high life without building a sustainable foundation, leading to massive financial crises and multiple relegations that threatened their very existence. The club entered a death spiral, exposed by severe debt and a transfer embargo. The trauma was existential, nearly resulting in the club being liquidated as they plummeted from the Premier League to League One, and then facing relegation to the 4th tier. The sheer volatility of their rise and fall defines this tier. They proved that a spectacular ascent is meaningless if the foundation is fragile. The era of Big Sam's European tours is a beautiful memory, but it doesn't change the fact that the club's leadership overspent and nearly annihilated the institution. They are a club that sacrificed its future for a few fleeting seasons of glamorous mediocrity. Their current struggle to simply maintain a stable competitive footing shows how permanent the scars of that mismanagement are. Bolton's identity is defined by a short, glorious party that led directly to a devastating, decades-long hangover, confirming they were never built for the Premier League's enduring, stable fight and are now paying the ultimate price for short-term vanity. Coventry City. This franchise is a testament to falling asleep at the wheel, a founding member of the Premier League that was utterly consumed by its own complacency and boardroom incompetence. They were relegated in 2001, and unlike bigger, more marketable clubs, they lacked the gravitas and financial cushion to bounce back quickly. Their original Premier League history was defined by a string of miraculous, last-gasp survival efforts under managers like Gordon Strachan, escapes that were thrilling but ultimately masked a deep, fundamental rot in their structure. They failed to capitalize on the financial boom of the late 90s, allowing their stadium and infrastructure to fall behind. The eventual fallout was catastrophic and deeply humiliating. The club was unable to maintain its home ground, the Ricoh Arena, due to protracted disputes, and was forced into exile, playing home matches in Northampton and Birmingham. They were a massive club without a home, a physical manifestation of their institutional instability. This tragedy was not caused by a single bad season but by years of boardroom ineptitude and a failure to secure their own assets. Their subsequent slide down the divisions, including a stay in League Two, cemented their status as the most spectacularly self-destructive club in this tier. They are the ultimate example of a franchise that allowed stagnation to become extinction. Even their recent cup runs and promotions are constant reminders of the decade of institutional neglect they must overcome. They are forever chasing the stability they willfully surrendered, forever looking over their shoulder at the prospect of further decline. They are a club that simply didn't take the Premier League seriously until it was too late. Coventry's problem is a lack of institutional ruthlessness. They allowed their comfortable, perennial mediocrity to become a permanent relegation, proving that simply surviving is never a sustainable plan in the modern game. Level 2, the tourists. Here for a good time, not a long time. Wigan Athletic. Their entire Premier League legacy is anchored to one single, shocking day, the 2013 FA Cup final. Against all odds, they defeated the behemoth of Manchester City to lift a major trophy. It was a beautiful, tear-jerking moment of sporting democracy, a massive payoff for a club that had spent 8 years punching far above its financial weight under owner Dave Whelan. But the curse of that victory was immediate and absolute. Just 3 days later, they were relegated from the Premier League, creating a perfect paradox. The club was a major trophy winner yet a second-tier team. This defining event confirmed their status as a tourist. They had the ambition to win a major trophy but lacked the foundational consistency and structural depth to simply survive in the top division. Their Premier League existence was a constant, nail-biting battle, often propped up by Whelan's financial commitment. They were the ultimate low-budget survivor, but their survival was always fragile, constantly shifting managers and relying on short-term fixes. When the high-risk investment dried up and the team finally dropped, the collapse was total, leading to multiple lower league relegations and devastating financial instability that saw the club enter administration. They proved that while you can win a cup on pure adrenaline, you cannot maintain a Premier League presence without deep, structural competence. The FA Cup win is their singular glory, but it's forever tainted by the immediate and complete failure to survive in the league. They are a club that gave everything for one day of glory, sacrificing their entire future in the process. Wigan's problem is that they were a fleeting moment of chaos, a cup team whose moment of ultimate glory simultaneously confirmed their ultimate Premier League failure and set them on a path of inevitable and catastrophic decline. Bradford City. The story of Bradford City's two-season Premier League tenure is a textbook example of a miracle promotion leading directly to an institutional crisis. Promoted in 1999, their survival in the first season under Paul Jewell was an incredible feat, achieved only on the final day. They were the ultimate low-budget darling. However, instead of consolidating, the club's leadership suffered from catastrophic overreach. They believed they were destined for greatness and spent wildly, accumulating massive debts on high-wage, mid-table players like Benito Carbone, who was reportedly paid $40,000 per week. This was an unsustainable gamble that failed spectacularly. They were immediately relegated in their second season with a disastrous total of 26 points. The financial fallout was brutal. The club was forced into administration twice in the early 2000s, sinking from the Premier League all the way down to the fourth tier of English football. They lost their training ground and spent years fighting for their very existence. They are the ultimate tourists because their brief moment at the top did not lead to any lasting competitive or financial benefit. It led to their near extinction. They proved that a lack of financial prudence can quickly turn a glorious promotion into a lifetime of struggle. They represent the devastating reality for smaller clubs who misread the Premier League's financial ruthlessness. Bradford City's failure is defined by a catastrophic misjudgment of their own financial weight, a dream season followed by a debt-driven nightmare that nearly wiped the club off the map, leaving a permanent scar of financial chaos. Swindon Town. Swindon's brief, singular season in the Premier League, 1993-94, serves as the ultimate historical warning for any promoted team. Their failure was so profound it remains a record. They are the only team in Premier League history to have conceded 100 goals in a single 42-game season. This achievement of futility firmly places them in the tourist category, as they were utterly unequipped for the elite level. They were simply a championship-level team, then Division 1, dragged up a level too high, proving the gulf in quality was too vast for survival. Managed by Glenn Hoddle for part of their ascent, they lost their defining tactical identity once Hoddle departed for Chelsea. They failed to invest wisely enough to bridge the competitive gap, and the resulting humiliation was absolute. They were relegated immediately and suffered a double relegation in the following season, falling straight back to the third tier. Their failure was swift, absolute, and total, confirming that for some clubs, the Premier League is simply a brief, destructive, and expensive excursion, not a genuine competitive opportunity. They are a club defined by 1 year of historical infamy, a statistic that perfectly captures their complete lack of preparedness for the top flight. Swindon Town's flaw was pure competitive inadequacy, proving that simply reaching the Premier League is meaningless if you lack the structural quality to compete, resulting in a historically humiliating points and goals tally. Level 3, the mediocrity trap. Trapped by comfort, doomed by complacency. Aston Villa. This club has been around forever, a founding member of the Football League, but in the Premier League era, they've been defined by drifting. They have one major trophy in this era, the 1996 League Cup, and that's it. For long stretches, they've been trapped in the comfortable middle, constantly finishing between 8th and 14th, good enough to avoid relegation, never good enough to challenge the European spots seriously. This complacency eventually caught up with them, resulting in 3 miserable years outside the top flight, a brutal exile that exposed their lack of top-tier infrastructure and investment. While they've had brief flashes of European relevance and a few strong seasons behind stars like Jack Grealish or a late-career Dwight York, it never adds up to silverware or sustained pressure on the top 6. Their story is consistently being the nearly team, the one that sells its best player right before the chance arrives. Their recent success is a great run, but it's still too fresh to erase decades of mediocrity. The club's tendency to change manager every 2 years shows a lack of long-term vision, constantly hitting the reset button just as momentum builds. They are content with safety, mistaking stability for ambition. Villa's core problem is that they are constantly fighting against their own historical inertia, unable to build a winning habit that lasts more than 18 months, settling for competitive anonymity over ruthless ambition. West Ham United. This franchise fits perfectly here. They have spent the Premier League era as a yo-yo club, cycling disastrously between promotion, relegation battles, and brief bursts of European qualification that never yield anything substantial. They won a European trophy recently, the Europa Conference League, which is great, but in the context of the Premier League, their defining trait is a lack of consistency. Their brand is built on potential, the Academy of Football, but that potential is always sold off. Declan Rice, Rio Ferdinand, Frank Lampard, Joe Cole, and Michael Carrick, all left for greener, more successful pastures. They are a club that develops players for others to win trophies with. They occasionally reach a final or qualify for the Europa League, but they have never, ever mounted a serious, sustained top 4 challenge. Their controversial move into the London Stadium was supposed to elevate them, but the resulting debt and atmosphere have often felt like a step backward, confirming their inability to manage monumental change. They are a club of moments, not movements. They thrive on the drama of mid-table chaos, but the moment they approach the elite, the squad depth, tactics, or nerve fails them. They are experts at securing survival by late March and then coasting to 12th place, accepting mid-table safety as a successful season. West Ham is the franchise that defines an unstable ceiling, incapable of holding on to success once they briefly achieve it, and constantly returning to the comfort zone of competitive anonymity. Crystal Palace. Palace is the definitive case study in comfortably maintaining competitive status through tactical stagnation. For nearly a decade, their entire Premier League identity was built around 2 factors: the brilliance of their talisman, Wilfried Zaha, and a relentless reliance on counter-attacking, defensive football under managers like Roy Hodgson and Alan Pardew. This style was effective enough to guarantee survival year after year, but it ensured an institutional ceiling of 10th to 15th place. They became the ultimate park-the-bus side, sacrificing any pretense of attacking ambition for guaranteed Premier League safety and the massive financial reward that came with it. They were never relegated in their long recent stay, which is an achievement, but they also never seriously threatened Europe, never invested boldly enough to break into the top 8, and often played football that was agonizingly dull to watch. They suffered from a failure of imagination, believing that simply staying put was the ultimate measure of success. Their failure is not relegation, but the failure to evolve past the singular, defensive identity, meaning that every season felt identical, ending with the same mid-table finish and the same struggle to replace their star player. They were comfortable with mediocrity, believing survival was the only goal. Crystal Palace is the franchise that demonstrates institutional stagnation, prioritizing predictable safety over the necessary evolution and ambition required to break the ceiling of the mid-table. Level 4, the Pretenders. Always expecting glory, perpetually falling short. Newcastle United. This is a massive club defined by moments of pure, tragicomic self-sabotage, now entering a new era of extreme, terrifying pressure. They had the Keegan era, the entertainers, who came agonizingly close to the title only to collapse under pressure from Manchester United in 1996. A failure immortalized by the "I would love it" television rant. They had Alan Shearer, the greatest number 9 in Premier League history, but won nothing. One FA Cup final defeat, one League Cup final defeat. They had 2 descents into the Championship, a humiliation for a club of their size. Even with their recent, radical takeover by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, the legacy of decades of underperformance and toxic mismanagement lingers. They spend heavily, they get hyped, and they inevitably fall short of expectations, often suffering from high-profile injury crises and a failure to manage the sudden weight of being one of the world's richest clubs. They are expected to win a title within the next few seasons, But the weight of 40 years of failure and the constant media scrutiny is a heavy burden that money alone cannot buy. It's an institutional flaw, a team that always expects the glory but fails at the crucial moment of execution. Newcastle's problem is a repeating loop of glorious near misses and disastrous collapses, a crisis of expectation where the pressure of the city's ambition constantly outpaces the team's ability to execute on the grandest stage. Everton. The blue half of Merseyside is the ultimate example of a large, historically significant club that has wasted its opportunity through sheer, consistent ineptitude. A founding member of the Premier League, they haven't won a major trophy since the 1995 FA Cup. That's nearly 3 decades of nothing. Their defining narrative is a fight against financial ruin and constant relegation battles, despite massive injections of cash from their former owner, Farhad Moshiri. This is a club that once considered itself part of the elite Big Five but has spent the modern era drowning in its own poor decisions. Over £500 million wasted on expensive, failed signings, 5 managers in as many years, and a massive, crippling stadium debt that jeopardizes their entire future. They are the ultimate pretenders who talk a big game, the People's Club, but have the record of a failure. They constantly fire managers for underperforming while the boardroom remains the source of the rot. Their recent history includes multiple points deductions for financial breaches, confirming a level of institutional chaos almost unheard of in the Premier League era. Their record against their biggest rivals, Liverpool, is a nightmare, a consistent confirmation of their secondary status. They are always looking up at their rivals, believing they should be competing for Europe, yet are perpetually staring over their shoulder at the relegation zone. Everton is the franchise of prolonged, agonizing decay, coasting entirely on a reputation earned in the previous century while the modern club fails to deliver on a single structural or competitive promise, proving that money cannot fix institutional failure. Tottenham Hotspur. They are defined by one crushing, existential truth: institutionalized near success. They have been a fixture in the top 6 for over a decade, building one of the league's most beautiful stadiums and featuring generational talents like Harry Kane and Son Heung-min. They constantly compete for the Champions League places. But the trophy cabinet is tragically bare. They have made the Champions League final, reached multiple domestic cup finals, and consistently finished above their London rivals, Arsenal, for years. Yet, they have never won the Premier League title, and their most recent trophy was the League Cup in 2008. They are the model of a perennial bridesmaid. They have the financial power, the fan base, and the world-class players, but lack the final, ruthless edge, the mentality, to convert high finishes into silverware. Their constant hiring and firing of proven winners, Mourinho, Conte, shows a deep-seated belief that they are one man away from success, when the flaw is clearly in the DNA of the club's leadership, who fail to back managers consistently or ruthlessly enough. Their greatest player, Harry Kane, left in the pursuit of the trophies his boyhood club could never deliver, a move that perfectly summarizes their competitive status. Tottenham is the club that epitomizes the nearly man syndrome, possessing all the necessary components for greatness but lacking the institutional ruthlessness and final killer mentality to seize it, forever locked in the shadows of their own potential. Level 5, the historical pillars. Built on past glory, defined by modern struggle. Arsenal. The Arsenal franchise belongs here. They are an absolute pillar of the league, defined by the Invincibles era and the long, trophy-laden reign of Arsene Wenger. They won the league 3 times in the Premier League era, completed an entire season undefeated, a feat of legendary consistency, and won numerous FA Cups. They have an established culture, a massive global brand, and decades of financial stability. They spent a period of nearly 2 decades outside the title picture, defined by a need to pay for their new Emirates Stadium, but they always remained relevant, always in Europe, demonstrating structural strength. Their resurgence under Mikel Arteta shows their ability to rebuild and return to the top table, but their title wins are confined to the past. They lack the ability to maintain the intense winning habit established by Wenger during their financial constraint era, suffering a prolonged period of competitive complacency. They are a historically great club, but their title wins are confined to the past, and they haven't achieved the repeated, sustained titles needed to move higher, leaving them vulnerable to the newer, relentless modern giants. They prioritize a specific style of football. The Arsenal way, over pragmatic winning, a beautiful flaw that kept them out of the dynasty tier for a decade. Arsenal is the franchise that lives off legendary history, possessing the brand of a winner but needing to prove they can restart their winning engine and translate their recent resurgence into sustained modern dominance. Nottingham Forest. This club is pure, old-school legacy weight. They won 2 European Cups under Brian Clough in the 70s and 80s, a legendary feat, but in the Premier League era, they are a cautionary tale. They've suffered multiple relegations and spent 2 decades outside the top flight, confirming that their history is completely irrelevant to their modern competitive standing. When they finally returned, they spent wildly on over 30 players and 1 summer to survive, confirming their status as a financial risk and a structurally chaotic club. They are relying almost entirely on historical nostalgia to paper over a modern lack of stability. Their Premier League history is marked by short, doomed stints followed by deep, demoralizing slumps, proving that the Premier League demands modern, strategic thinking, not just historical pride. The history is a burden, constantly setting a standard that the modern club cannot possibly meet. The weight of the past forces high risk, desperate spending to simply survive, leading to financial fair play breaches and points deductions. They are forever trying to relive the glory days without the foundational genius that created them. Forest is the franchise that carries the heaviest historical baggage, where the weight of past greatness constantly crushes modern reality and forces a chaotic, unsustainable spending policy merely to stay relevant. Liverpool. This franchise carries a colossal historical legacy, a founding pillar of English football and the dominant force of the 70s and 80s, but their modern status is cemented by the Jurgen Klopp era and their ability to return to the summit after decades of struggle. They broke a 30-year Premier League drought with a dominant title win, added the Champions League, and redefined the modern standard for intense, high-energy football. Their flaw was the inability to translate their incredible consistency into more Premier League titles, often running into the historically unstoppable Manchester City machine. However, their cultural footprint, their rivalry with Manchester United, and their ability to succeed across decades and rebuild under different regimes make them one of the most important clubs in the world. They are the embodiment of global passion and emotional, thrilling success, defined by the intensity of their fan base and the electric atmosphere of Anfield. They are the ultimate example of a club that successfully leveraged its history to return to the modern elite, doing so with a transfer policy that emphasized smart, key signings over mass expenditure. They proved that a club can win the biggest prizes by building a cohesive unit and hiring an era-defining manager. They are a pillar because their current success is built on decades of history, not just recent financial injection. Liverpool is the franchise that bridges history and modernity, proving that institutional weight combined with world-class managerial genius can break decades of drought and return them to the top table, though lacking the sheer volume of titles to climb higher. Level 6, the Modern Giants. Short, explosive peaks built on financial shockwaves. Chelsea. Chelsea is the first true modern superclub. Their history is defined by the 2003 Roman Abramovich takeover. They are built on ruthless financial injection, not historical growth. They have won 5 Premier League titles since 2004, 2 Champions Leagues, and numerous domestic cups. They are masters of the sack and win philosophy, proving that winning can be engineered through sheer expenditure and zero sentimentality. They have 2 massive failures: the inability to establish a long-term managerial dynasty and the recent, chaotic expenditure under new ownership. Their history is littered with brilliant, but short-lived, eras under managers like Mourinho, Ancelotti, Conte, and Tuchel. They win, they collapse, they re-engineer, they win again. They are a modern force, but they lack the decades of sustained, organic dominance of the top tier. Their recent $1 billion spending spree that yielded only mid-table results perfectly encapsulates their chaotic but ambitious nature. They are a modern force, but they lack the decades of sustained, organic dominance of the top tier. They changed the definition of a big club in the Premier League, forcing everyone else to raise their spending. They are the only club to have consistently challenged the 2 Manchester giants over the last 20 years. Chelsea is the franchise built on engineered financial shockwaves, delivering world-class trophies but perpetually struggling for long-term strategic stability, prioritizing the result above all else. Leicester City. Their story is defined by one monumental event, the 2016 title win. That is perhaps the greatest single accomplishment in Premier League history, a true sporting miracle, achieved at 5,000 to 1 odds. That singular achievement grants them a temporary place in this tier. They proved that with brilliant scouting and cohesive management, you could overcome the financial logic of the league. However, the rest of their history is an immediate collapse back to reality. They won the title, sold off their best players, Kanté, Mahrez, and then had a decent, but short, run of top 6 finishes before collapsing into relegation again. That title was an anomaly, not the foundation of a dynasty. Their financial model demands selling their best assets to stay afloat, turning their sporting achievement into a financial stepping stone for others. They failed to capitalize quickly and wisely enough on the global exposure of the title, and the cost of replacing world-class talent with mid-tier signings proved fatal. They are a great club, but their status is built on one peak season, not long-term competitive strength, proving that even a miracle requires ruthless investment to be sustained. They achieved the modern peak of the game but failed the long-term competitive test. Leicester is a one-hit wonder franchise that briefly achieved modern giant status, forever defined by a glorious moment that the club itself was financially and institutionally unable to sustain, forever cursed to chase that single high. Blackburn Rovers. Their story is simple and absolute. They achieved the ultimate goal in 1995, winning the Premier League title under Kenny Dalglish, financed by the massive, ambitious spending of local owner Jack Walker. They beat the establishment to the title, establishing a brief, modern dynasty with the relentless goal scoring of Alan Shearer. That singular title grants them a spot in this tier. However, that era was a flash in the pan, proving to be the exception, not the rule. The title team quickly dissolved, Shearer was eventually sold, Dalglish left. They failed to compete in the Champions League, and within a few years, they were relegated. Their subsequent history is one of desperate attempts to return to the glory days, eventually leading to the catastrophic ownership of the Venky's Group, which decimated the club's structure and led to a brutal, self-inflicted fall into the lower leagues. They proved they were completely incapable of managing success. The structural flaw was clear. They were a one-man club, both financially and competitively. The moment Walker's funding and Dalglish's leadership were gone, the entire dynasty disintegrated, leaving behind only the faded picture of a triumphant day. They are a modern giant whose peak was absolute but whose subsequent failure was a complete institutional collapse. Blackburn's flaw is that their financial foundation was entirely reliant on one man's wallet, meaning the moment the funding stopped, the entire dynasty disintegrated and was replaced by institutional incompetence. Level 7, the Dynasty Builders. Defined by relentless, era-shaping dominance. Manchester City. Before the 2008 takeover, they were a Level 1 club. After it, they became the most dominant force in modern English football. They have won 8 Premier League titles since 2012, including multiple three-peats, and the elusive Champions League. They are defined by strategic, ruthless dominance and the tactical genius of Pep Guardiola. Their success is built on state ownership that allows for unparalleled investment in infrastructure, talent, and coaching. They have achieved perfection at a speed previously unseen, constantly pushing the tactical boundaries and the points totals required to win the league. The intensity and frequency of their titles in the 2020s are unmatched. They are the new benchmark for sustained excellence, fundamentally changing the competitive landscape of the league. They are the ultimate example of modern sporting evolution, a triumph of strategy and overwhelming resource allocation. They force every other club to play catch-up, both tactically and financially, and their ability to seamlessly replace legends and maintain their winning streak is the definition of a well-oiled machine. They are the ultimate, engineered dynasty. Manchester City is the franchise that bought and engineered ultimate modern dominance, achieving modern perfection at a speed and consistency that makes them the definitive dynasty builder of the 21st century. Manchester United. The historical dynasty. While they ultimately belong in the GOAT tier, their placement here acknowledges their post-Ferguson collapse as a definitive chapter in their modern history. For 2 decades, they were the absolute benchmark, winning 13 Premier League titles under Sir Alex Ferguson. They mastered the art of winning in every style, constantly reloading their team, and always having the killer mentality, establishing the longest, most brutal winning dynasty in English football history. Their dominance was so profound and so sustained that their brand became synonymous with the sport itself. The post-2013 history is their greatest flaw, a decade of institutional drift, chaotic transfers, and a failure to hire a suitable successor. This prolonged period of mediocrity, often finishing outside the top 4 and failing to challenge for the title, has only reinforced how utterly brilliant the Ferguson era was. They are a dynasty architect that simply forgot how to build once the master left, proving that even the strongest club is vulnerable to poor management and a lack of foresight at the top. The constant hiring and firing of managers, the massive spending on underperforming stars, and the repeated boardroom failures define their current competitive identity. Manchester United is the original dynasty architect, whose unparalleled historical success in the Premier League era ensures their status, even as their current failure to maintain that dynasty proves its reliance on a singular genius. And there you have it, the definitive hierarchy of Premier League franchises, defined not by ambition, but by their ultimate failures and institutional flaws. Speaking of flaws, if you enjoyed this brutal analysis of franchises, you need to check out my previous video where I broke down the biggest problem with every single Premier League superstar, from Haaland's isolation to KDB's fragility. The connection? The institutional failure of the clubs we just discussed often relies on these superstars. Hit the like button and subscribe if you want more uncompromising football analysis. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, leave a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe cause I'll be posting frequently here.